This podcast contains descriptions of violence against children and adult language and is not suitable for all audiences. Listener discretion is advised. Hi, everyone, and welcome to Suffer the Little Children, the true crime podcast giving voices back to the victims of child abuse and shining a harsh spotlight on the parents, guardians, and caretakers who silence them. I'm your host, Laine, and this is Patreon-exclusive bonus Minisode number 5, Aidan Leonardo. Never leave a baby alone in the bathtub. Not only is this basic rule of parenting simply instinctual, but it's also one of the first things we're taught when we begin babysitting, or at the very least, when we become pregnant. Babies drown very easily in bathtubs. A baby can drown in a sink, in a puddle, in a mop bucket, even in a single inch of water. To most of us, it's a foregone conclusion that we would never leave a baby unsupervised in the bath. Apparently, no one ever taught this lesson to 32-year-old single mother Lindsay Louise Leonardo, or maybe she thought her 23-month-old daughter counted as supervision, because she left the little girl and her 11-month-old brother, Aidan, on their own in the bathtub on Wednesday, January 8, 2020, with about 4 to 6 inches of water. According to Lindsay's arrest warrant, the reason she left her children alone in the bathtub in their home on the 1200 block of Boyd Station Road in Knoxville, Tennessee, was because she needed some me time. Lindsay stepped outside for about 2 minutes to smoke a cigarette and to listen to 2 songs. I really want to know what those 2 songs were. Now, don't get me wrong. As a mom, I have learned that me time is absolutely vital to my mental health. In fact, experts say the same thing. Self-care is an important part of parenting. Common sense would dictate, however, that making self-care a priority does not equate to your health and wellness is more important than the safety of your child. After Lindsay got her fix of both nicotine and sweet tunes, she returned to the bathroom to find Aidan floating face up in a tub brimming with water and her daughter standing in the tub beside him. Lindsay claimed her daughter must have turned on the faucet, causing the tub to fill up. She told police she took her unresponsive son out of the tub and put him on her bed, calling 911 and performing CPR with guidance from the dispatcher. As most people know, you should never do CPR on a bed. It's best to perform CPR on a rigid surface, like the floor. EMTs from American Medical Response arrived and rushed Aidan to Tenova Turkey Creek Medical Center, where they were able to regain a heartbeat. Later, Aidan was transferred to the East Tennessee Children's Hospital. Another first responder, Jeff Bagwell of the Rural Metro Fire Department, told news station WBIR Channel 10 that cases involving children hit first responders hard.
This is a tough call. 3-year-old and the 1-year-old were in the bathtub, and what we know is that the 3-year-old turned on the water, and that the children were unattended. The CPR performed on the child. They were able to get a pulse back. The child was then transferred emergency traffic to children's. Anytime you have a kid, what we call kid calls, they're tough. But at some point, those emotions come out. Listening is probably the most important thing to do for the crews that were involved, is to listen to them. They're coming back to work tomorrow. There's another call. There's another emergency that's going to happen. We have to immediately focus on the task at hand and not get caught up in the emotional side of it.
At the time, Aidan was still alive. Tragically, just before 9:30 p.m. on Thursday, January 9, 2020, Aidan Xavier Leonardo died in the hospital. Knoxville County spokesperson Kimberly Glenn said, "Our hearts are saddened at the loss. We expect additional charges to be forthcoming. As for now, the investigation is continuing." Prior to Aidan's death, Lindsay faced charges of aggravated child abuse, neglect, and endangerment. Knox County Sheriff's Office Family Crimes and Major Crimes detectives arrested Lindsay at the hospital on January 9th for the initial charges. After Aidan died, she faced charges of felony aggravated child abuse and first-degree murder. Lindsay, who was represented at the time by Knoxville attorney Susan Shipley, was held at the Knox County Detention Center on a $350,000 bond. According to court records, Lindsay had a history of conflict with Aidan's father, David Brandon Dillingham, who was 31 years old at the time of his son's death. In May of 2019, David filed for an order of protection against Lindsay on the grounds that she followed me home and comes to my place of work and cusses me in front of my coworkers. His petition was dismissed by the court because he did not prove his case by a preponderance of evidence. In October of 2019, Lindsay filed for her own order of protection against David, telling the court, "My relationship with David has been traumatic from the beginning." In the petition, she accused David of threatening to harm the children. The case was dismissed for the same reason David's was. Despite the issues between them, since Aidan's death, David defended Lindsay in the press. He said, "She's just awesome as a mother. I don't want to see her in prison. She does not deserve to be there. She's a really loving and caring person."
Lindsay is a great mom, and she would never do anything to harm the babies. It was just an accident. Lindsay is not to blame for this, even though she just made a bad judgment call. We just didn't see eye to eye on things, and, every relationship has its problems. Please watch your children very closely. Every second counts, and you can't take anything for granted.
After her mother's arrest, Aidan's sister was placed into the care of her grandparents. I haven't been able to find any information on where she's currently living. A graveside service for Aidan took place on Saturday, January 18th. He was laid to rest in the Barry Highland Memorial Cemetery in Knoxville. At Lindsay's preliminary hearing on February 4th, 2020, Knox County Sheriff's Detective Miranda Spangler testified that she found no evidence to suggest Lindsay intended to drown Aidan. She was, however, most definitely neglectful, Detective Spangler said on the stand. She left her baby in the tub. Lindsay's attorney, Susan Shipley, argued for reduced charges at the hearing, saying that while the baby's death was tragic, there was no evidence showing that Lindsay meant to hurt or drown him, adding that the charges were unsupported by the evidence. Suggesting a charge of reckless homicide would be more appropriate, Ms. Shipley told the court that to be charged with first-degree murder, a person has to know the result of her conduct would cause a death. Ms. Shipley questioned Detective Spangler, asking if she knew when she interviewed Lindsay that the mother had received permanent, traumatic brain injuries in a vehicular accident years ago and had relied ever since on a trustee to take care of her assets and finances. Detective Spangler replied, "She said she'd been in a car wreck and had been in the hospital a while," adding that she didn't discover the details of Lindsay's condition until she spoke with Lindsay's mother in a separate interview. Knox County Assistant District Attorney General Sarah Keith argued that Lindsay had to have known the possible devastation her actions could cause. Leaving a child alone in the bathtub, Ms. Keith said, is inherently dangerous. After deliberating overnight, Knox County Judge Patricia Long Hall bound over Lindsay's charges to a grand jury on Wednesday, February 5th, rejecting Lindsay's claim that Aidan's death was unintentional. Judge Hall said, "She walked out of that bathroom with her 2 babies in the tub. This is not an accident. It is intentional. The only thing that's not foreseeable is that her other child didn't die." On Thursday, August 12, 2021, 34-year-old Lindsay Leonardo appeared in court, entering a guilty plea to a charge of reckless homicide, as well as misdemeanor child endangerment. The prosecutor and Lindsay's defense presented the case to Knox County Criminal Court Judge Scott Green, who accepted the plea agreement and sentenced Lindsay to 4 years in the Tennessee Department of Corrections with credit for time served. For now, she remains in the Knox County Jail until she is transferred to a state prison. The bottom line is that an 11-month-old baby is dead, the promise and potential of his entire life is wasted, a little girl has to grow up without her younger brother, a father has lost his son, and a mom with at best terrible judgment and at worst evil in her heart will be spending hard time in prison. This is a tragedy all around, no matter how you slice it. Somehow, I doubt Lindsay thinks her 10 minutes of me time was worth the cost.
2025 Laine here with a very quick update. It occurred to me that Lindsay is probably out of prison by now, so I looked her up on the Tennessee Department of Corrections website. Lindsay, who is now 37, was released on December 9th, 2022. I don't have an update on what she's doing, but it appears she's still in Knoxville.
Aidan Xavier Leonardo was born on January 29, 2019. According to his obituary, he was one of a kind and always smiling, laughing, and loving. He was a blessing to everyone who came in contact with him. David told CNN that there are no words to describe the happiness he brought into our lives, and I am proud he is my son. My sources for this minisode were WATE, People, WBIR, CNN, Facebook, News Channel 9, Dignity Memorial, the Knoxville News Sentinel, and the New York Times. That's it for this Patreon-exclusive bonus minisode. Join me next time for another story.
If you like the show, please follow or subscribe to Suffer the Little Children on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, Spreaker, Pandora, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, or your favorite podcast listening app. And please leave me a 5-star rating and a positive review on your favorite podcast platform. Visit the website at sufferthelittlechildrenpod.com. You can support the show by visiting patreon.com/stlcpod, where you can become a patron for rewards ranging from a shout-out by name on the show to exclusive gifts. You can also support the show at ko-fi.com/stlcpod. Follow the podcast on Facebook and Instagram at Suffer the Little Children Pod and on TikTok at STLCpod. View photos related to today's episode on Facebook. This podcast is researched, written, hosted, edited, and produced by Laine. Intro theme music is by Dream Note Music, and all music for the show is licensed from audiojungle.net. For more information about preventing or reporting child abuse, visit childhelp.org or call your area's child abuse hotline. And remember, if you see something, say something.